Hello,
Hi, Jonas.
can you hear me?
Yep, loud and clear.
Yes, hi Jonas.
Perfect, perfect. So I am in bed. This is going to be my camera tonight. I can turn it off, but I can also keep it. I'm literally like in bed.
Yeah, keep the camera.
Love it, love it.
Sure, done.
Th-
Is it time? Are we good to go?
Oh, we just hit the minute mark.
Hey, Rami.
Oh, this is
This
it.
is
we're doing it. This casual nonsense is being broadcasted.
this is it. I mean,
All
I was
right.
I was seriously hoping that Rami would also be in bed, but he's
We
way
don't
no,
know.
more.
We can't tell.
I'm in the
He's
void.
way
I'm in the
you're
void.
but you're way more professional than I am. You actually are in the void. But
Right. It's a good
yeah.
way of not showing people that I'm actually laying in bed right now.
All right. Well, I think whether we're in bed or not, we should probably get started on the panel itself. Hi, everybody. I'm Rebecca Valentine. I am a journalist, recently with GamesIndustry.biz, soon to be at IGN. I'm delighted to be moderating a discussion over the next hour entitled "Hindsight is 2020: The Global Games Industry's Lessons Learned and the Road Ahead." I'm joined today by four expert panelists. Jonas Antonsen. I hope I said that right. You are, I am told, the Chief Excitement Officer at Raw Fury. Hi.
Hello. Well,
That's the
yeah.
title that was on the panel.
I love that, but mostly what I've been doing for the last 20 years is just getting in the way of people and making their jobs harder. So my job today is literally just not being in the way. Uh, so chief excitement officer sounds great. I would say that my real title is stay away from people officer.
Well,
A tough job.
well, I hope you won't try too hard to stay out of the way of this panel because you're a very important part of it. We also have Bobby Wertheim, Director of Content at Sega Europe. Hi, Bobby.
Hi.
And Anya Combs, Director of Games at Kickstarter. Hi, Anya.
Hi. There is a wild storm happening despite all of the sun. There's a wild storm happening in New York right now. So if you hear a lot of wind, it's just wind that's outside my window right now.
Goodness.
That's some awesome sound. Like you should record that. You should
really
literally
should.
record. Yeah.
You know what's funny is there's actually like someone left a fan on the street and the wind blew over the fan, and I've just been watching the wind blow this fan down the street. That's been my entertainment all day.
I love it. We can get a fan cam.
It's my OnlyFans. Nope, I'll see myself out. Goodbye.
Let me see. That took 3 minutes.
Right. And then we also have Rami Ismail, Executive Director of GameDev.world. Hi, Rami.
Hi, a pleasure to be here.
Glad you are all here. So these four are going to be chatting over the next hour, not about the fan outside of Anya's apartment, but about what they believe the games industry might have learned throughout 2020.
That's our only fans, though. That is literally our only fans.
We're gonna try. And what that means for the global games business in 2021. So I guess just to get it sort of started, you all have fairly different expertise. And I'd love to just sort of hear from each of you, whoever wants to start is fine, as to what you think the biggest trend or learning or takeaway from 2020 was that the games industry as a whole should sort of be looking at as it moves forward.
Rami?
Me? Oh, I got volunteered.
Throw him to the wolves.
Okay, well,
I'm calling you out.
I think the biggest thing is that we learned to be less dependent on anything that happens in the real life, right? I think as an industry, we've had to make a pretty hard shift to doing a lot of our stuff online. And even though for independent developers that has always kind of been a reality, like distributed teams, remote working, this year we saw the industry kind of make a forced shift to accepting that and being part of that. It has brought with it some incredible opportunities for the industry at large, like easier connection across the world, more accessibility to events and opportunities. It has also brought with it some challenges, right? Like working as a creative team over a distance is not necessarily easy. Forms of communication between management and people in teams had to change, because getting a message that just says, "Hey, can we talk?" and then nothing for like 6 hours is the most terrifying thing you will ever see. So I think in terms of the biggest shift in the industry, it was probably that, right? Like marketing had to go online, team management had to go online, like building our games had to go online. Everything went online, and I actually think there's both very good and very bad potential for that, and I'm looking forward to see how it evolves and whether we keep the gains. Like the more access, the easier ability for people to be part of these online events. I hope that we keep that after the world progresses to whatever normal comes after, right?
I'd love to follow this. I'd love to follow this from my very comfortable bed in Stockholm, Sweden. Because Raw Fury is a publisher, right? And one of the if I go to like the positive things that happened in 2020 with everything, is that it leveled the playing field all of a sudden, because we see about like 1,700 to 2,000 games per year, and all of a sudden, when you don't have the physical contact, you don't have GDC, you don't have any of the other places where you actually meet people. All of a sudden, you have a level playing field of people that are sending you games and pitches from South Africa, from Argentina, from Chile, from Brazil, because they're just doing the same as people that are doing sending you pitches from Germany, the UK, the US, Sweden, Norway, whatever. And that was an interesting takeaway for us, that a lot of the submissions, a lot of the people that connected with us probably never had a chance to travel or meet us in like a physical space.
Right.
And now all of a sudden we had to like take them at the same merit as everyone else. And I think that if there's one thing I don't want to go away from the last year, it's that. It's
Right.
It's that.
I mean, for the past year, I've been doing free consultancies for independent developers, right? They can just sign up on my Twitter and I'll talk with them for 20 minutes if they are not in the Western sort of spaces of the world, right? And the most common question I've had is, I'm pitching to Raw Fury, I'm pitching to Devolver, I'm pitching to these companies. How do I pitch? Right? I've never been to an event. I've never seen it. I've never had a conversation about this. I don't know anything. Help. Right? And I think that shows how much latent potential there is in our industry worldwide that has been exposed by this. I've been traveling for 10 years. I've been meeting these developers for 10 years. I've known their stories, but seeing them now have the opportunity to talk to people, to reach out to people, to get the benefits from a GDC where they normally can't go because visas won't allow them or are incredibly expensive or the travel is prohibitive. Hearing that they now have a meeting with, you or with anybody, that it's incredibly exciting. I can't overstate how big a part of the year that was for me.
I agree. This is the highlight, the positive highlight of 2020 is exactly this.
I'm actually kind of curious, Anya, did that change on your end as well? Like, did you see more, because I guess Kickstarter is always online, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's interesting. I have such personal conflicted feelings about it that I'm actively trying to work through about all of this, as I'm sure we all are. So we actually had our best year on record. We had the most video game projects in terms of monetary and also just numbers that were like funded and launched and all of that. And obviously tabletop, was massive. We had over $1 billion pledged. We had the highest number of tabletop games. Our success rate in tabletop alone was like 70% for 2020. So part of me is like, this is great. This is awesome. Like I'm able to pay my rent through my job and things like that. But I have the conflicted feelings about it because on the other end, I have so many friends here in New York who have all lost their jobs. They're on unemployment. A lot of people have left the city. Like it's just, there's been a massive devastation sort of like ripple effect. And so I'm trying to look at it from the perspective of like, I am not responsible in saving everybody, right? Like I Anya Combs alone, as much as I would love to, am not able to save everyone. And so while I would love to be able to help all of my friends and just people within my network, find jobs and help them pay for things, what I am able to do through my job and through Kickstarter is I am able to ensure that people within my creative industry and my occupation are able to continue to do the work that they want to do. And I'm able to make sure that I'm, sometimes somewhat responsible for keeping my coworkers employed. So it's kind of a weird sort of feeling to live with. But we just saw bonkers numbers. And I think there's so many different reasons as to why that is. I think the biggest is that I think everybody watched all of Netflix the first month of quarantine. And I think that people are so starved for new content that they continuously backed Kickstarter projects in hopes of, now being able to actually play a lot of these games with each other.
I recently got a coffee machine that is also an alarm. Thank you.
You're so welcome, That's what we're here for. Just board games and coffee machines that are double as alarms.
Tell me about that later.
I would love to raise a question on the back of that, on the back of what you just said.
Yeah.
Which is throughout history, when humanity strives, art thrives. And it just turns out that games are an artistic medium, right? And we're seeing that happening right now with the luster of games, right? Where people are locked up, they need some sort of escapism, and not only escapism, but also some sort of other worlds, I would say, or something. They need art to give them hope and some sort of positive way to view the future. So my point is probably this. I think that coming out of 2020 and hopefully 2021 and later, we are seeing games finally being embraced as an artistic form and as a way, with all the other creative mediums, books, movies, paintings, music, to alleviate pain.
I think sorry.
No. I was go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say too, like, I think there's even a little bit of a deeper narrative there, which is specifically, I think what a game is potentially being redefined in 2020. And so I think a game can be so many different things. And so to kind of like echo what you're saying, I think experiences like Animal Crossing and experiences like Among Us, games that sort of require a different perspective as to like, oh, it's not just like a pew, pew, pew shoot game, right? Or like, I'm just going to jump over stuff. I think that what a game is really sort of finding a new definition because of what we're sort of going through in 2020. So I completely agree with you that like art's always going to be the answer, but I also am, hippie artist person. So like, I don't know how much my perspective matters here.
Plenty.
But like art is always going to be the thing that people look towards.
I
I do want to
really
make
want to
sure.
hear. I
Yeah.
really want to hear Rami's take on this, like because I've known him now for about 10 years, Rami.
Right.
Like we've
Right.
been running it, yeah. So I really want to hear your take on this because
I mean,
for as long as I've known you, you have a unique take on anything and everything. So I
I
just
mean,
want to hear it.
I think in this case, my take is very similar, right? Like games have a really unique connective property that you can't really find anywhere else. I think Anya kind of like summarized it in the best way possible there. Like games are connection, whether it's games that you play together or games that you play alone. And I think like that's why we're in this industry, right? Like I think we all recognize that and we all care about that. Um, and whether it's a game that you're playing alone and talking to your friends about because you've all played it, or it's a game you play together so you don't feel as alone, whether you're running around on an Animal Crossing island, um, it's togetherness. And that's what we needed this year. That's what games were. Yeah, I think Anya perfectly summarized it there.
Oh yeah.
I want to make sure that we get Bobby in here. Bobby, I would love to hear kind of your perspective on, I guess, just sort of this whole discussion so far. Whether that's a trend that you saw emerge in 2020, or just kind of what's been discussed by the other three.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd echo everything that people have said. It's so my role within Sega is to go out looking for developers, like as a scout, and find developers to invest in. And from my perspective, it was proof that not only are we recession proof, we're also pandemic proof as an industry. But it doesn't come without a lot of hard work, right? It was a lot of hard work by everybody chipping in, from developers, publishers, event organizers. Every facet of the industry, people had to really adapt to this new environment we're in. And because of the nature of our work, I think we were able to really kind of work digitally, work within from our own houses, and find out how to have big discussions in a Zoom meeting where you can only really have one conversation at a time, but there's multiple people in a room. Figure out how to try and do something creative in this way. I think it wasn't easy, I don't think, for anyone, but it's certainly, the industry's been doing well. From my perspective, all the events got cancelled, like one after the other, early on in the year. All the events I was thinking of attending, right? E3, everything. It was just like, oh my God, how am I going to do my job? How do I go out and speak to people? But then quite quickly, all the event organizers either delayed their event or rescheduled it or reformatted it another way, or there were different new events coming up. So that allowed me to kind of scour the internet for really cool talent. I think the tough thing was how to deliver on time and how to deliver something that's creative and artistic, and how to keep people motivated and keep a sense of culture in your organization. I think those were probably things that everyone still are facing challenges with today in our industry. But there's loads of tools to help us do that. So it's been a really, like, it's been tough. It's been a shit show, right? Really, to be blunt, it's been really tough, but it's been good at the same time. So I count my blessings, and
Right.
Well,
I think moving. Sorry, go on.
well, I'm going to be the super controversial one in this conversation. I'm just going to say it, that the situation that we're going through in the world right now, that is absolutely horrible, is still one of the best things that could have happened to our particular industry and our artistry when it comes to games.
I mean,
Like elevated games to the level that they should have been at for like the last 10 years. And I absolutely know that taking this stance is awful, because we're going through a period of time that is horrible for the human race. But I come back to my argument that when humanity strives, art thrives, and the art that we have, like the modern art, like the artistic form that we have right now to express ourselves, be it hopes, be it dreams, be it nightmares, be it fears, is through games. And just looking at it long, yep, yeah, yeah. This is probably gonna put me in a very bad light, but here we are.
I think it's like there's definitely more articles being written about games in a different way. Like, traditionally games are written about like causing children to interact with something that's really violent, and maybe then that shows up in their behavior. We've all read those articles. And then now really there's a lot more articles about how games is giving people help with their mental health and giving them, instead of being in their
Right,
four walls,
But
they're in
right.
their
And
imagination.
I'm not only talking about articles in the media. I'm talking about like the real effects of what we do.
right,
I've
like I
spent the
but
rest.
I have
I've yes. Sorry, Remy, go.
I have like I understand what you're trying to say, right? But like in my head, in my mind, these are things that were going to happen anyway. Like this
That's true.
transition was happening. This sort of like improved understanding of what games are, either as old generations, sort of like moved out of the discussion about it. Like teachers are gamers nowadays. Like parents are gamers nowadays. Like this shift was happening either way. Like if there are specific things that were forced through this crisis, it was the move to online, right? That is the one thing I will give this situation, like this sort of like forced acceptance of remote work, remote events. That would not that I cannot see a timeline in which that would have
And
happened, because
it's
as
it's
it
an
was,
acceleration, right? It's an
right.
Yeah.
acceleration of what was already
Wh-
happening
which
rather than
if I
change.
could pick between this and decelerating, I would decelerate again. But um but I understand what you're trying to say. Like I get what you're getting at. Um that said, like, God, I wish we could just turn this back to before this and
Yeah.
like figure these lessons
Oh,
out in another way, right?
I
oh
have
my God!
Right.
I'm
No,
not
no, no.
trying
I
to.
know. I know.
I'm not an advocate for COVID.
Yeah.
I'm
I
glad,
don't.
Jonas.
I understand. We
I don't
understand.
think
Yeah.
anyone here is an advocate for COVID.
Right.
What I'm saying is that this situation that we are in, as horrible as it is, has shown a light on the importance of art in general and games being a part of it. So I hope that is very clear. I
Right.
would
For sure.
literally not want to be in this situation that we are right now. All of us, like in quarantine, lockdown, and having had probably all of us on this call having lost people to this like
Right.
horrible
yeah.
thing that
Yeah.
we're going through. So my point is that in this day where we are now, with people being online, with games being uh, mass consumed, I think the only, like, it's the silver lining thing, right?
Right.
How do you look at like the only good thing that comes out of a crappy situation?
Right.
And for me, it's this, that maybe finally games are being viewed as something that moves you, makes you feel something, makes you really understand the
Right.
feelings and the emotions that you're going through. So that was my
I,
point.
I would oh, go on, you go ahead.
Oh yeah, sorry. So I am either fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it. Sometimes it gets me in trouble, and sometimes it's kind of what saves my life. I am an eternal optimist. I will always find the silver lining. I will always find the like rainbow in any crappy situation that I'm in. And I feel like, just to kind of echo what you're saying, I feel like one of the positives that I know I'm going to take away from this entire experience is how important it is to be incredibly thankful for the things that you have and to slow down just a little bit. It's okay to take breaks. It's okay to like not do something, and it's totally okay to say no, which is something I've never done in my entire life. And I think more people are going to learn how to say no to things. I also think, quite honestly, I know that like part of our profession is like, make sure that you're attached to your screen, right? Like play your game on mobile and play your game on console and things like that. But I also feel like, just to kind of echo the experience part of it, I think when you're able to do those things, when you're able to sit down and really play a game, when you're able to sit down and have that time with like your friends and your family to play a board game, a video game, a mobile game, whatever it is, I think I genuinely feel like those experiences are going to be so much more meaningful to people once we're all able to actually be around each other. And I think that is really going to be reflected in the games that are made moving forward.
Yeah. So that actually is a really good segue into kind of sort of the second half of the question of this panel, which is, what does all this mean for 2021, right? And you've all talked about, kind of how last year accelerated a lot of trends. You've all named several of those trends. So I guess I would love all of your perspectives on what does end up happening in the next year. What do you think? What are your predictions? Like what models and what trends from 2020 does the games industry as a whole actually embrace and carry forward? And what does it not embrace? I mean, will face-to-face meetings continue to be extremely important, or do we permanently kind of embrace this new digital future? What happens to events? So yeah, I guess whoever wants to kind of jump in on that.
Can I start?
Sure.
Can I start? So I think the biggest thing that we'll see out of this is so games, like any other creative medium, is split into two halves. With writing, with words, you can have the two halves. You have something like Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, which is an incredible piece of art. And a book that has changed lives all over the globe for generations. But you can also use the same words to write the manual that comes with your refrigerator, right? And that's going to be like a very it's going to be a very a functional part using words. Games are the same way. They can be entertainment. They can be art. They can entertain you, like take you out of the world for a little while, but they can also make you like think and be and affect you to an extent that you never realized before you played that game. And I think that after this year, I think we will finally go into so I think we spent the last like 10, 20 years seeing games as being a mass market thing where everybody plays games. My mom, probably your mom, your dad, everybody. But I think finally this year and in the future, games will be recognized as being a part of something that makes us deeply feel and be a piece of what we consider art.
I think so. I think industry wise, the sort of changes that we're going to see, personally, I don't really believe that they're going to be related much to 2020 at all, right? I think a lot of what is going to move in our industry is we're going to take a few of the things from 2020 forward, right? Like I think a lot of people have seen the opportunity in having a global reach in like not locking things to locations, but beyond that, industry wise, like our industry doesn't move in a year. It's just not how it works. Like the big ship, right, of games, it hits some rocky waters, it just sails, right? Like it'll keep sailing. I don't think anybody is like seriously reconsidering their long-term strategies or their long-term goals over 2020, which I think is actually fine. Like we don't really need to adjust much based on the events of last year, and hopefully by the end of the next year, the world will be a lot more normal, or more you can go outside again, I guess. So I don't foresee any major shifts in the industry. Like the movements that were there are the movements that were there before, right? Like there's the push for workers' rights, sort of like push for where appropriate unionization, the push for VR, right, to become a bigger part of the industry by some companies.
Games being like looked at as art.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that was also a movement that was there before. It's not quite an industry movement. I think we're aware of it and we've been pushing for it, but it's a cultural movement, right? That is happening around our medium. It continues to, like, our industry continues to focus around ideas like Twitch, live streaming, like the sort of general movement there. If you just scrapped 2020 from the history books, right, and you just went from 2019 to 2021, I don't think anybody would notice. Right. The biggest thing people would notice is that we've moved so much of our infrastructure to be more accessible to people around the world, to remote working, which is a huge opportunity for a lot of companies to be able to hire more broadly, because not everybody has to move to the same space necessarily. For publishers to get access to games from further around the world, right? Like for events to not lock their opportunities behind visas and traffic, like those are the biggest changes, and they're to industry strategy at like a high level are relatively irrelevant, right? Like I think they're beautiful, I think they're great, but the ship sails and it sails onwards. So
No,
I don't know. Like,
go ahead and let Rami finish, and then I want to let Bobby and Anya get a word in too.
Right. I think the one thing that I've seen that made me really happy last year, that is sort of an industry movement that I hadn't quite foreseen, but that makes a lot of sense in hindsight, is that a lot of people were just locked up at home for a year and they ended up making video games. People that normally would have not tried or not have had the opportunity or not have had the time. Again, like on the consultancies, the amount of calls that I'm getting that are just like, hey, so I was locked in at home in March, and so now I'm a game developer. Like that was pretty high, and I'm actually very excited to see that there's this sort of non-commercial push happening in games right now, with people just making stuff because they want to make stuff. I think that's going to be, we're going to see some interesting stuff from that generation of people.
Let me get Bobby.
Before Bobby goes, I just want to like add this one point, because I do believe that me and Rami we agree on this point profoundly. One of the biggest things that happened last year with all the events going away was it leveled the playing field. All of a sudden you have people all over the world from countries that have been misrepresented, that could not, like developers that could not get to DGC, could not meet people like me or people like Rami. They have the same, they're at the same playing field as anyone else, and that I would love that to be the same after we get out of this situation. Because it's amazing, like the game development that's happening in South America and most countries in Africa, and some of the underrepresented countries in Asia, it's crazy. But when you have the regular status quo of DGC and the Gamescom, and where everybody meets everyone, well, quote unquote, they're not there. They're not represented. But when you take that away, when you take all the events away, they're on the same playing level, and I love that. I love that, and when we move forward, we need to make sure that stays intact.
Right.
Bobby and Anya, what do you think?
Go ahead, Bobby.
Well, I totally agree with that sentiment. I think it did level the playing field. It was one of my notes that I wrote down. before this call of like, oh, things I should say, because I totally agree. And in terms of events for this coming year, like I'm pretty sure, like from looking at the event schedule at the moment, quite a lot of the people who are organizing events right now from Q2 onwards haven't committed to it being a digital only event. Quite a lot of them are still trying to do a physical portion, but they're definitely trying to do a digital portion of their event. And I think that kind of hybrid event is here to stay, even after the world goes back to what was pre-COVID. I think it is right that it stays that way. I completely agree, and I think it will. It definitely attracts. It's a positive thing, and it's not very costly for organizers to be able to continue to provide that portion of the event. So I think it will. I certainly hope it does, and all indications is that it will. So I think that's a good thing.
Well, I'm gonna be controversial again on this call and say that Robbie, like if you need financial support to do your virtual event this year that you did last year in 2030, hit me up because we will fund it. And secondly, I want to say like fuck GDC, like fuck the thing of like, seriously. Fuck this thing of trying to put the gatekeeping up of who can afford this? Like what developers can afford like getting to those talks? It just makes no sense.
We definitely need more. We definitely need more accessible alternatives.
Yes.
I think that's going to happen through the digital platform though, right? Like so just to kind of my perspective to answer Reb's question here, I think there's sort of two different buckets that we have to look at from this, right? So one is the sort of the content perspective. We're talking about art, we're talking about games. And so, and that directly impacts the second bucket, which is the business bucket, right? So the business bucket are things like going to conferences and having those meetings and having those one-on-one conversations. And they do sort of like mirror each other. And so how does 2020 potentially affect all of that? I think I sort of come from a little bit more of a middle ground, just kind of where Rami's talking. I do agree with you that like a lot of this stuff is like, we could just kind of like yeet 2020 into the Hudson over here and like nothing's going to happen sort of situation. But I also think one of the things that, at least coming from, I hate to bring this dumb Western American perspective of things, but when we're talking about conferences like GDC and we're talking about conferences that do require a visa, one of the very, very positive things that has come out of 2020, at least for us in the US, is having a new president, where we are going to definitely have totally different perspective in terms of travel and visas and things like that. And I think that's going to be a huge thing.
It's not just the visa, right? It's the cost of the hotel, the flight, the everything, the ticket to get there. It's really prohibitive.
It's incredibly expensive. And I think having that digital alternative to all of these conferences is so smart and so necessary. And I think that's such a great idea. I do think we're going to have a little bit of a different perspective in terms of health.
Wait, can we let Anya finish?
Yes.
Thanks.
Yes,
I think having health and safety at conferences is going to change. I think we're going to have a lot more hand sanitizing stations. I think we're going to be required to like just be a little bit safer with each other. I think handshakes are not going to make a comeback anytime soon. I think we're going to be doing elbow bumps and like high fives from across the room, which I am totally okay with. But I also think, just to kind of continue like echoing what Bobby's saying too, and just finding that middle ground with Rami, I think that the types of games are going to shift, and I think that is going to change some of the funding models. I think we're going to see completely different funding models with publishers that we haven't even seen yet, we haven't even thought about. I know, at least like from the crowdfunding perspective, obviously as a Kickstarter person, this is kind of where my brain has to come from. I think the way that people are running projects are a little bit different, again, thinking about safety. And even, I know this is video game specific, but thinking from the tabletop perspective of things, how do you create a game where you don't have to touch pieces? That I think is a really, really interesting thing that people are starting to think about too. So I think a lot of this stuff comes in hand, change the funding model, because of the art has to change.
Right.
Yeah. This maybe kind of bounces off a point that I think Rami made earlier, possibly, but like, do you feel that this, and that what you're saying too, do you feel that Rami mentioned that there's, all these people who have just, suddenly decided that they're going to make games because they've had a year to do so. Do you feel that there is going to be challenges related to finding support for those games in the coming year? Because it takes time to make a game, right? And, some people have made games over the course of this year, right? And they're going to, if they're getting serious about it, they're going to potentially be looking for funding, looking for investment, looking for support in the next couple of years. Does the publishing industry, does investment rise to meet that, or do we now just have a much more crowded development field of people trying to get in?
I mean, I guess from where I'm standing, like it's same old, right? Like there's always going to be more supply of games than there is availability to fund it and to support it. Like even if you look at something like the Games Press, right? You can only write so much on a website before your page is full, right? So this is not, I don't think that is necessarily the change I was getting at. I think the change that I was getting at is that a lot of more people seem to be making games without the intent of making money. And I think that is interesting because it means that the tool sets have evolved to a point where you can do that, right? Games used to be this relatively specialized, hard to do, spend 2 years of your life to make a game. Right now I'm seeing people throw together something cute and fun for a birthday of a friend, right? And it takes them like a week to make, and it's cute and it's fun and it's nice. And I actually think that is extremely exciting. In terms of distribution, we're running into the same problems as always, right? And I think what we're seeing now is again, like this was a 2019 thing, not a 2020 thing, but like the shift to subscription models continues stronger than ever, right? Things like Game Pass, Apple Arcade, whatever those are a bigger and bigger part of funding. It's going to change how we make games as well, right? Just like Anya is saying, just like how tabletop is thinking about the pieces, we're thinking about, okay, what does an industry look like where we're not necessarily directly selling to consumers anymore? I'm trying to sell it to Microsoft. I'm trying to sell it to Sony. I'm trying to sell it to, and then, venues like Kickstarter become sort of like the experimental, like these platforms are not investing in that. And the publishers sort of become like the middle ground between that. But as these changes happen, I think a lot of the industry, and I guess Bobby, I don't know if you can speak to this, but I think a lot of people are sort of in a holding pattern with where exactly they're going to go, because a lot of the industry is just somewhat uncertain right now. Like we're not quite sure.
On a really macro level, it's mobile's still growing. PC's pretty stable. Console switching to the new next gen, right? And that's all indications are positive. I think the big maybe shift that could come at a high level is probably cloud gaming, the subscription models that you kind of touched on now. That could really cause, okay, what kind of games is it that people are going to start engaging with? Because it won't just be the AAA blockbuster annual releases of X from a certain franchise or whatever, right? It will kind of change what their kind of consumption habits are based on what channels they're engaging with. So yeah, that could be interesting how that evolves over time, but it won't happen over just the next 12 months. It's more of a longer term kind of thing, I think.
Do we I'm just curious, I'm sorry, Reb, if I'm
go ahead
speaking. Okay. I am sort of curious just with like kind of how history repeats itself, and our industry is still to a certain degree a little bit of an infancy stage. Do we think we're going to see like a giant influx suddenly of new publishers coming out?
I mean, I guess I don't know if you've noticed this, but I've seen mostly a lot of funds.
Yeah.
Like grants, funds, like alternate models to publishing. Which I think is interesting, because I think recently publishing has sort of become more of a network organization thing, right? They're not really doing everything in-house anymore. A good publisher tends to have like marketing that they can reach out to, localization. They have reliable partners and funding, right? And I think that fulfills a really important need in the industry where people just need all of those. But you're also seeing initiatives like Kowloon and the Moonrise Fund and that are more based around, okay, you have a game, you have a company, you are serious about this, but you want to do this, right? So you figure this out. And I think that has been the biggest shift over the last year and a half for me, is like the amount of funds rather than publishing, it seems to grow. And I'm not quite sure if I can't tell yet if they're successful at what they do, because the results are not in yet.
Yeah, it's too early to tell.
But
do do you want the
The,
actual
pub-
publisher in the
the
room
publisher
to
opinion.
answer this, to
Go
answer
for it.
the question? Um, so, long story short, like I do believe that that Raw Fury reinvented publishing. Uh, that's my view. That's my personal view. I think we did. And I can hear like Garabi like laughing in
I
the distance.
You should believe that, otherwise you shouldn't be doing it, right? So
Well, well, I mean the big story is this: we've put out 18 games with partners, and they're all financially successful, which shows to me that the model that we created is great. It's great.
so so how are you, like, because I've been wanting to ask you about this. Like, one big change that Raw Fury made last year, I think that is very interesting, is they gave us an opportunity to talk about our contracts,
Mhm.
which no publisher had ever done before. I do want to again like thank you for doing that, because I think that was a huge moment in the indie game scene, is to just have a contract where you can go like, this is good, this is bad, and like obviously you kind of became the flashpoint of all the things that were bad were suddenly being talked about.
Of course.
But it was a big moment in games for this year. I think we are starting to see sort of this new generation of relatively business savvy indies with like very strong business minded goals. And I always think of indie as a counterculture, right? Which means that
Sure.
what they seem to be countering is just how we did business before, which in a way that's very exciting, because even my story at Vlambeer, it did involve crunch, right? It did involve working too hard. It did, like, those were the stories in 2010. We were proud of that, right?
It's
And we
because
grew over those. We grew over
well,
those years. We grew over those
Rami,
years. Jonas, like,
Let him finish.
please, yes,
we
okay.
grew over those 10 years to understand that crunch was bad, right? But we still started from that mindset. And I think the indies that we're seeing now, they are very idealistic at getting the business right, getting the business set up in a way that is equitable, that is fair, that allows people to be healthy and happy. I think as an industry, like, there's always the things that we can learn from the indies, right? There's always a thing we can learn from God, I'm getting old, from the youngsters, right? The idealists.
Oh,
the
you
new,
said it.
the new folks,
Ra-
right? I'm
but-
getting old. I have to accept that.
Welcome.
but
We
Rob-
embrace you, Rami.
But like,
Robbie,
I think there is
Ro-
hope in that, right? I think there's beauty in that evolution, and I'm really looking forward to see what they do and how they kick our ass in that, because, God, like, we
I-
kind of need it, I guess.
so here's my disagreement with you. Like, I don't think there is a change in what you describe. I ran a developer for 10 years. When you're on that side, when you're creating something, like, that's the hardest work that you can do, because it's subjective. You put your heart and mind and everything into it. You never stop working.
Right.
And that is that's the whole premise behind Raw Fury, is that we are there to help the small development teams, the developers that are on that side, right? Because you know this, right? You don't just stop after 8 hours and go home and not do the thing, right? It just doesn't happen. When you have an idea, when you want to develop something that is creative, which is a piece of art in your mind, you do not stop. And you should not have a partner in that scenario that on the other side goes like, okay, yeah, well, our day ends at 5, so bye.
I think the one thing I will answer that is, I think what has changed is not the passion we have for the things we want to achieve. I think the things that we want to achieve have changed, right? The things I wanted to achieve back then, it was just make the best video games ever, right? That was it. The things I want to achieve today is make the best video games ever while my team is happy and healthy and safe and not crunching.
I'm totally there with you, and I'm not, like, just to make sure, I'm not advocating crunch,
Right.
or like at all.
I'd
I'm
be
just
very
saying.
disappointed if you did, but I'm glad you're not.
Oh my God, yes. Oh my God, like a lot of our time actually goes into, like, please slow down, please take your time, do not burn out, right? But I think, having been on the other side of that, let's say, creative paradigm, someone telling you this and someone trying to like slow you down is hard.
Right.
It is hard. And I wish we would do here is my wish. I wish we would do a better um, job at that as an industry, because we burn out way too many people, like way too many brilliant people every single year. So there is something that we need to fix and do better. But we also have to realize when it comes to and I'm not talking about Cyberpunk. I'm not talking about big games. I'm talking about like small teams. I'm talking about you, Lumbeer, right? You need to create how do you create that ecosystem where you go okay, take your 8 hours of sleep, wake up tomorrow, you'll be better. I don't know if that's
I think a lot of. Sorry, Rebecca. Sorry.
Could I actually add, because I think this supports your point earlier, Rami, what you were saying, seeing more funds instead of more publishers emerging. I just hi, I'm a journalist. In the last couple of years, I've written up a lot of stories about these new funds starting, and an awful lot of them seem to be either started or backed or just otherwise informed by or connected to networks of independent developers who started like a decade ago and made successful games and made it work. And there's always, I keep writing these stories, and there's always some kind of language in there about how they're trying to make sure that these new up and coming independent developers have this support network attached to it who can guide them in the kinds of things that you're describing, making sure that they're working in healthy ways and making sure that they have connections to publishers and more money and more support as they go on. So I think I guess that's the trend that I'd add, is that I have seen over the last several years sort of this movement of experienced independent developers who now want to turn around and help lift up the next generation and help them do it well, and do it in some ways as well as they did in terms of success, but also better than they did in terms of being healthy and being safe and being good to themselves.
Yeah, I want to just I put this in the chat for everyone to see, but also just I feel like this is all great, and I agree with a lot of it. I am curious to see if we're also just going to start redefining some of these terms. And I don't mean like terms of contracts, I mean actual language.
Right.
And so I'm thinking about how the word indie and the word publisher has changed so significantly over the years, right? Like for a long time, we were like, oh yeah, Double Fine's indie. And like Double Fine was not indie, and they have not been indie for a very long time. They're only indie for the definition alone, but the word indie means so many different things within our industry.
Mm-hmm.
So I am curious, and I don't have the answer, so I'm just sort of like thinking off the top of my weird brain. I am curious to know like how many of these terms are going to be redefined sort of in this new landscape going into 2021, right? Because we can say like publishing deal, but publishing deal can encompass things like the new funding models. Some people think a publishing deal is like if you've backed a Kickstarter project, then you're part of that world, and now you're a publisher on the game, which is like crazy to me. Or like they're an investor on the game and things like that.
Right.
Right. And I can kind of understand that, and like I guess from just purely like business standpoint, okay, great, fine, whatever. But I feel like redefining of terms is going to be really necessary for our industry moving forward too.
Yeah. Bobby, do you have any thoughts?
Well, I think all of the.
Hold on.
Jonas, let Bobby.
Yeah.
Let's hear from Bobby.
Yep.
So I think language is always evolving, right? And how we use words and what they mean to us has been changing always. And with, like you said, with our industry being still in its infancy, really, we're still growing up, finding our way, and we're often comparing ourselves to music and film and stuff. I think it's natural that we will further kind of polish our pencil and what we mean when we say stuff, and people get more alignment with what we're trying to say with it. So yeah, I think it is going to evolve for sure. I totally agree. Sorry, I've got nothing to add there.
No, that was great. It's great.
It's also just interesting because I think splitting some words might be helpful, right? Like crunch has obviously been a big word in the past like 2 years, 3 years. And I think the discussion now about crunch is also sort of like nuancing what we exactly mean with crunch. Like, is crunch a week of people working late, right? At an indie where it's 2 people and they both agree to work late and then take a week off? Or is crunch like the sort of systemic, forced upon, insidious thing that keeps destroying creative teams? Like, which one of those are crunch? Which one of those are
Thank
passion?
you for bringing that up. Like, thank you.
Oh, hey,
for
hold on.
bringing that up.
Hey, Jonas, let Rami finish, please.
We're trying to figure that out, and it is. I think as the industry evolves, like a lot of these discussions that become flashpoints, right, that become really important in how we talk about things and how we discuss things and how we prioritize things. Yeah, to Anya's credit, bring that up. I think that is actually something that is happening right now and has started, and is going to be incredibly critical to how we communicate, especially with the added spotlight that Jonas was talking about earlier. We are now in the public view, right? Like, and we have been for a few years, but I think there is a reckoning either coming or happening with that. We have to understand that we are popular culture now, right? And potentially defining popular culture in the eyes of everything. And with that comes opportunity, but with it also comes, like, the increased monitoring that we're seeing in the European Union, in the United States, the sort of fragmentation of global law, right? Because that's a big issue that we're seeing now, like different levels of restrictions, of requirements across different countries. We created things like the ESRB and PEGI because it was too hard to let governments decide things like that for us. We're in for a world of hurt if we don't start like dealing with the big issues of our industry on an industry level, because if the governments start doing it, good luck figuring out what the difference is between Dutch law, Belgian law, and Luxembourgian law. Like, have fun. Like, if we don't do it, they will do it. And this is something that I keep seeing and I keep getting involved in. Like, how do we create industry standards that are healthy, that that allow us to move forward? And I think over the next, instead of 2021, maybe over the next 3 to 5 years, what Anya said will define the future of our industry. Like, how do we define the words, the phrases, the priorities of our industry? And how do we make sure that our language is precise and accurate and like actually tackles the things that we want to tackle? And it's politics are here. it's a thing. There's no way around it anymore. We've grown too big to go, let's make some indie games. It'll be fun. Like, it's an industry, it's a world now. And I think at large games already understood that, right? But we're reevaluating how we want to be represented on the global stage. And I think that's it's interesting.
Jonas, did you want to go ahead? Oh.
Yes, thank you. Like, just listening to Rami, he obviously knows his. And I'm sorry for the French, but shit. He knows his shit. But here's the thing: there's a division in the industry. You have your Ubisofts, Konamis, Rockstars, etc., right? Where you have hundreds of people making something, and I would contest that most of them do not feel ownership over what's being created. But then you are in my part of the industry, or like Rami's part of the industry, but like Raw Fury exists to work with small teams, even individual developers, like a single person that is just making magic, up to like small teams that are doing that, right? And when it comes to like, there are several discussion points here. Most of the teams that we work with, like, trying to tell them that they should not work so hard is almost impossible, because these are people and I hope you back me up, Rami. Like these are people that have been thinking about what they're creating for years, for even like a decade. They have poured their heart, soul, everything into what is being created. And if we end up signing it as Raw Fury, like we are there because that's magical. It's something that is spectacular, something that is beyond just a game. It's going to make you feel something. It's going to make you think after you have played through the whole experience. And so I really believe that we have two sides of the game industry. Like with any other creative medium, you have uh, in our in our medium we have entertainment versus art,
Mhm.
and it doesn't mean that art can't be entertainment or entertainment can't be art. It means that those are the two inflection points. Just like you have with the written word, where you have the manual with your refrigerator versus Marcos Aurelius writing
Right.
meditations, right? Um, and that's where I sit. That's where Raw Fury sits. And when it comes to a complex subject like crunch, the reality is that no matter how much I want the developers that I work with not to burn themselves out, and we do that constantly. We try to uh, make sure that you do not do that. They are working on something that is so personal, that is so deep to them, that is such a big part of their being that it's a hard thing to sell them on. And the only thing that we can do as a company, and that's the hard thing with Raw Fury, is that because we should match their passion. If they sign with Raw Fury as a publisher, I want them to feel, and we should be the partner that cares as much about their game as they do, right? So this is why I'm saying crunch is a difficult topic, because I think I think it has two very distinct conversations tied to it. One is if you look at Rockstar or like any other like big AAA developer, there it is absolutely an issue. When it comes to independent games, small teams, it's hard because how are you going to sell someone on the idea that like literally lives and breathes of pushing their artistic creation out into the world? How are you going to tell them like, no, you need to sleep more? And I think I hopefully think that you, Rami, agree with me, because this is
I mean,
I'm
I,
not saying it's
yeah, no,
impossible, but it's
I
like,
get it.
yeah,
Like what you're trying to say is like if somebody's passionate, you're not going to be able to convince them to be less passionate. And I agree with that. But I do think as an industry, we have a responsibility to set an example of what passion looks like, right? And I think that's really where we're
100%
Yeah.
agree.
right.
Yes.
So
Hey, gentlemen. We're a little bit over time. I did want to give Bobby a chance to
Yes.
sneak in with one final thought, since I know he hasn't gotten to say as much as the rest. Bobby, did you have anything?
I'm just like, because the thing is, I'm absorbing what everyone's saying, and it's like I'm just honored to be here, to be honest. Yeah. So a final thought. I think to reflect very briefly. Last year, I attended double the number of events I attended the year before. Because I was able to attend, right? I didn't have to travel. There was no jet lag, so I saved time in a way, and I was able to do more in the year in a way. And there's plenty there's a lot of opportunity out there for all the indies out there to be able to, like Jonas was saying, it's leveled the playing field. So hopefully, I'll be able to see everyone's pictures. Really look forward to seeing it. Hopefully there'll be an event, that first event that brings everyone together physically when
Oh
it's
gosh.
safe to do so.
Steve
I
feels so
really look forward to that one, and we can all have a drink together. That would be amazing.
1.5 meter high fives everywhere.
Sounds wonderful. All right.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so we are definitely over time, so we have to stop. Yeah, thank you so much for watching. This talk will be available to watch later on the XLA YouTube page. If you missed any parts of it or just want to go back and share it with people, it should be up sometime next week if you missed it. And thank you so much to Bobby, Anya, Rami, and Jonas for taking the time and having such a wonderful, insightful discussion.
Thanks, Rebecca.
Thanks for moderating. Appreciate it.
Have a great day, everyone.
Cheers.
Thank you so much.